Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to kick things off. Who here knows about the gay animal kingdom? Raise a hand if you've ever heard of or even met any of the following gay, bi, and queer men out there in the wild. A bear, an otter, a meerkat, or even a prawn, okay? So many of these animals are familiar to me. I was a regular user of dating and hookup apps throughout the late 2000s and early 2010s, where I discovered a compendium of categories to describe myself and others. I learned how to hack the algorithm, the tweaking of buzzwords in my bio, profile pictures that struck the right mix between smart and sexy. If the app gave prominence to a certain category of gay man, I was more than willing to present myself as that category. But in the process, the line between the category and the thing being categorized, me and my desires, became increasingly impossible to untangle. So my name is Kevin Guyan. I'm a researcher and writer and author of 2 books, Queer Data and Rainbow Trap. And tonight, I'm going to be talking all about the science of categories. The taxonomies, classifications, labels, and boxes that dating apps use to manage and sort gender, sex, and sexuality. Right now, we're living through a really interesting moment. We're living through a revolution of identity categories. Apps such as Grindr, Tinder, Bumble, and Field allow users to select a myriad of genders, sexualities, desires, and relationship types. However, this expansion of categories is also happening against a backdrop where efforts are being made to erase trans, non-binary, and queer people from existing in data and data systems. And this has become a key strategy in the UK's anti-trans movement. Categories, therefore, are not just about a type of sexual liberation. They're also about moderating, censoring, and shutting down. And this is really important because right now we're also living through a revolution, a digital revolution. It's predicted that by 2040, 70% of all relationships will start online. And in the UK, in May 2025, more than 1 in 10 online adults visited a dating app or website. So this is by no means a fringe topic. Yet, as I'm sure many of you in the room tonight are familiar with, the data used to train these technologies is awash with biases about gender, sex, and sexuality, often promoting the status of white, straight, cisgender men. And in many countries and contexts where being LGBTQ is taboo or illegal, the information you store on your phone can become a dangerous source of evidence. These harms, though, are not what I'm here to speak about tonight. Instead, I want to ask one big question. I'm really interested in whether dating apps describe a world or are shaping the world they claim to describe. I wanted to think tonight, what are the categories used by dating apps? What role do they play in constructing ideas about gender, sex, and sexuality? And how does this web of relationships, desires, likes, and labels, what does it mean for LGBTQ communities? Okay, now for the science. It's not just about the data being used to train these technologies. It's also about the designers behind these technologies and the algorithms they use. Tinder, as I'm sure many in the room are familiar with, is one of the UK's most popular dating apps. And it presents itself as being open about its algorithm. The app historically used something called an ELO score. That's a term from chess used to rank players. App users would be ranked according to desirability, with proposed matches based on those rankings. If a lower ranked user got a swipe right from a higher ranked user, they would move up the rankings. So the effect of this approach created an exponential kind of success, leading to a Tinder elite. However, from 2019, Tinder changed their approach, following complaints about their ranking of desirability, and moved to a model which is now, according to the company, based on three things: what users say about themselves, what content features in their photographs, and their relative popularity in their area. So in my research and writing, I argue that those interested in the lives and experiences of LGBTQ communities, they can learn a lot by looking at work in the field of science and technology studies. Now, here are two ideas, two kind of takeaways from my talk this evening that help us all make sense of what is happening in queer encounters with different types of dating apps. And the first idea I want to plant in your heads is this idea of convergence. So this comes out from a book published in 1999 by STS scholars Jeffrey C. Bowker and Susan Lee Starr. And they coined the term convergence to explain what happens when people get put into categories and how we learn from the categories how to behave. The second philosopher of science I want to share with you is somebody called Ian Hacking, who similarly described something called a looping effect. And this is what happens when the multi-directional relationship between a category and the thing being categorized. It's a classic chicken and egg situation here, how classification rules partly shape the thing they're trying to classify. Now, I believe these concepts also highlight a really fundamental tension between queer communities and classifications, and how the classifications used to describe us ultimately come to define us. Thinking back to my time on dating apps, I kept putting myself in the category of twink. It seemed harmless, just one of the labels the app used to kind of assist with the sorting of its users. However, over time, that label began to shape my life. It influenced how I saw myself and who I thought I desired. But looking back, I'm not sure if I was ever really attracted to men with 26-inch waists and bleach-frazzled hair, myself included. I thought I was choosing a category, but really the category was choosing for me. I had limited myself to what the app told me I should want, but desire is not so easily put into a box. I therefore want to share with you what I see as three key problems around queer categories and the datification of desire, and ultimately what we can all do in response. So the first problem I want us to think about is who designs the algorithms. All categories and classifications, they all have designers, and these design decisions are political. Gender and technology scholar Diana C. Parry highlights the world-building capacities of dating apps and how programming choices legitimize some sexual behaviors and delegitimize others. As an example, when setting up maybe a Tinder profile or Bumble account, users are invited to share information about their gender, age, and name. They are then prompted to provide information about the genders of the individuals with whom they wish to connect. Parry and others query and question why this aspect of sexuality, the gender of our prospective partner, why is this elevated above other aspects of people's sexuality, such as relationship types, hobbies, and sexual activities? App designers ultimately decide who sees your profile and what connections are made, whether twinks connect with bears or meerkats meet prawns. In turn, app designers are partly shaping how you think about yourself and your desires. Okay, problem two I wanted to think about. More categories are not enough. Throughout the late 2010s and early 2020s, dating apps expanded the genders and sexualities available to users. For example, the dating app Field reported that in 2024, over half of their members who identify as heterosexual connect with people on the app who do not identify in that way. Fields has reported that over 180,000 people changed their sexuality during their first year of using the app, and that the longer Field members are on the app, the less heterosexual they get. But even with this proliferation of options, something still isn't working. Speaking with the researchers Carolina Bandinelli and Alessandro Gandini, Sandra, a 35-year-old dating app user from the UK, exclaimed, "The algorithm is not getting me right. See what matches it gives me? Do you think I'm that type of person?" For Sandra, even with the offer of more and more options, the algorithm was classifying her in ways at odds with how she understood herself and the connections she wanted to make. And finally, problem number 3, categories shape who and how we desire. The US scholar Guyan has described our current era as a taxonomical renaissance. I wish I'd coined that term. It's a beautiful turn of phrase, because our interactions with categories and classifications are shaping who we are. I want to give you a few seconds to digest the quote from Guyan on the screen. Now, imagine some of you in the audience might find this a peculiar or controversial idea even. Surely the available categories just reflect the world around us. Well, not always. The curation of categories plays a key role in authorizing the existence of different identity groups, whether it's options you find on a website drop-down menu or the boxes you can select from in a national census. So tonight, I wanted to think about classifications as descriptions of the world versus classifications as something generative that produces the world around us. So to bring things to a conclusion, why does any of this matter? Why do I think this is an important topic? To unpack this idea further, the legal scholar and activist Dean Spade has described how systems invent and produce meaning for the categories they administer. This leaves us thinking, are we telling tech what we really, really want, or is tech telling us? And I wanted to think about, rather than trying to fix dating apps so that classifications and categories offer a more accurate account of the world out there, I wanted to instead consider whether dating apps are ever capable of reflecting the messiness of queer desire and queer experience, and whether these technologies can ever cater for all LGBTQ+ communities. A fundamental tension exists here. And this understanding of these tensions inspired me to write a book, Rainbow Trap, which looks at how the provision of more inclusive categories across a range of different spaces often does nothing to reconfigure narrow ideas about gender, sex, and sexuality. And as the playwright and writer Travis Alabanza has observed, all categorization has achieved are more boxes around gender to fit us within, rather than being a tool to smash the rigidness of those boxes. Technologies learn from our data footprints, what we click, search, view, and listen to. And this information does not only flow in one direction, it also shapes our understanding of the world around us. The possibilities of desire might seem infinite, but when kind of mediated through a small number of for-profit tech platforms, opportunities to explore these possibilities often sit beyond our control. So we can learn a lot about love and desire by thinking critically about the categories used and concepts from science and technology studies, such as convergence and looping effects. Messy ideas about desire, attraction, and identity are fed back to us as reflections of what we always really wanted. So I want to leave you with this final big question. Are dating apps describing a world or shaping the world they claim to describe? Thank you. Now, before moving on to Q&A, we have a little game, very excitingly. What I'd like us to do is, there is, under one person's chair, a pin badge. And if you have a pin badge under the side of your chair, you are the lucky winner of a free book. So if you find a pin badge kind of stuck under your chair, please let us know. We have a winner. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Kevin? We have time for a couple. I'll go over there first.
Hi, thank you for the very interesting talk. I have read some of your first book. I haven't made my way through the whole thing yet. But I was wondering if you have explored in your work like the rankings of categories and the ordering of categories. Obviously, the sort of typical one that we've seen for donkey's years is putting man before woman. And that obviously reflects many biases. But I'd be interested to know whether you've looked at that in terms of gender identities and sexuality as well.
Yeah, fantastic question. Yes, so a little bit in my kind of new book, a little bit more in my kind of first book, Queer Data, super interested in diversity monitoring forms, how they're designed, how they're used, who sits in the room and decides we're going to select these sexualities, these genders, and then kind of, as you're saying, how are they going to be ordered, how are they going to be presented, and the differing rationale for that ordering. So I know some organisations who will do it alphabetically, some organisations which will choose to put the most kind of popular category first, which works in some situations, but doesn't work when you're not sure of those relative sizes. So for example, when the census added new questions on sexual orientation, we didn't maybe know the kind of level of popularity for the kind of categories. So a variety of ways of doing it. But I think these have also real world effects because as we know, when completing a survey, when doing a piece of research, some people will just tick the first box at the top of the page, so which might then lead to kind of certain insights around that. So again, all of this is about politics. All of this is about, one of my key arguments in both books is when we're talking about numbers, quantitative data, categories, there's nothing kind of objective there. It's all shaped by who's in the room making these decisions, from the ranking to the design of them. And I think that's a real kind of key aspect of that. How are they ordered? So thank you for that.
And one last question at the front.
You mentioned that field users, heterosexual field users, become less heterosexual the longer they're on the app. Can you quantify that at all?
So I don't work for Field, unfortunately, so I can't go into more detail for that.
Have they said, yeah?
Yeah, so Field is one of the kind of dating apps I look at in a bit in depth in the book because they're very open about their data. They put a lot of publicity out there, kind of differentiating themselves from more kind of mainstream apps. And one of their big claims, actually, I was interested in to what extent the dating apps acknowledge that they are shaping the communities that they serve. And I think of all the kind of more major ones, Field, I think, is quite savvy to the fact that how they label their categories, how they kind of order, how they design their technologies is not just reflecting a pre-existing world. It's actually shaping who and how we desire. And I think there's something quite profound about thinking through that back and forth around technology. So Field have some fantastically interesting, mainly kind of public relations stuff out there, but where they look at how their technology is shaping, impacting people's sexuality and desire.
Thank you so much. That's all we have time for. One more round of applause for Kevin.
Thank you.